So Jim Loeb says, realists win again. Justin Raimondo, of course, today at antiwar.com/Justin says, not so fast. Well, I got the brand new Gareth Porter here from IPS News. Seismic shift or non-decision by Bush on Iran. And it will soon be available, if it's not already, at antiwar.com/Porter. Welcome back to the show, Gareth.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
It's great to have you here. I'm doing good. Listen, so what's the deal? Is it Jim Loeb or Justin on this Iran thing? I guess I should say background. They're sending the number 3 State Department weenie to Switzerland to meet with the Iranian nuclear negotiator this Saturday. And the hope is that, hey, Bush has finally turned over a new leaf a la North Korea and is going to negotiate with these people rather than just further create pretexts for bombing. What do you say? What do you know?
Well, I've come down on the side of being a little bit more skeptical, but I have to say that, you know, this story of the U.S. sending William Burns, the third-ranking State Department official, to Geneva for this Saturday meeting is an illustration for me of just how difficult it is to read the signals coming out of the Bush administration. I mean, this is particularly a problem because this administration is so dysfunctional. I keep using this term over and over again, but I think it's appropriate. It's extremely dysfunctional in that you have a sort of permanent bureaucracy, you know, which is under the control of the likes of Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice, which is clearly interested in trying to engage Iran diplomatically and is scared to death, really, of the military option being exercised by the Cheney White House. And so you have that permanent bureaucracy really conspiring, in some cases rather effectively, to try to mousetrap Bush into taking certain steps. But on the other hand, you have Dick Cheney in the White House, who has the inside track and who is able to, in many cases, and has in many cases, essentially talk Bush out of taking steps that Bush was inclined to take after hearing from Rice and or Gates. And, you know, this is a perfect example, it seems to me, this current development of the Bush decision to approve the Burns trip to Geneva, but with some caveats which strike me as so constraining that it really reduces the significance of the decision to very close to diplomatic insignificance.
Okay, so it's not a matter of they decided, okay, well, we'll do this so that we'll have further example to say, see, we tried to negotiate with these people, but they're just too crazy. It's more like Rice got a deal where she gets to send her number 3 guy, but in the same meeting, it was decided by her competition in the vice president's office or the vice president himself that the meat would be so dumbed down and the constraints so tight that it would basically be meaningless. That's what you mean by dysfunctional family.
That's
here.
The story that has now come out. You know, I think we have to be very careful about accounts that are very vague and very general of specific meetings. And bear in mind that this has been going on. This issue has been since certainly late June, early July. In other words, it's been well over 2 weeks. It was about 2 weeks, during which time Rice was really pushing very hard to get a decision from Bush, clearly to allow Burns to participate in something like a freeze-for-freeze 6-week informal talks process. This is what the EU foreign policy chief, Javier Solana, clearly wanted. This is what wasn't really necessary in order to basically get around the obstacles that the United States in particular, but other powers as well, were posing, which was that Iran had to stop its enrichment entirely in order to have real negotiations on the nuclear program. So the idea was that you'd have this 6-week window in which they could meet informally, and that would allow the Iranians to really present a proposal that could then be a substantial topic of negotiation. And I think just having one meeting is really inadequate for that purpose, particularly given the stricture that supposedly is now imposed on Burns, that he cannot actually negotiate or supposedly even talk. He's there to listen, supposedly. Now, that's sort of so extreme that it's difficult to even believe. But in any case, there is obviously a one-off or one-time only constraint on the State Department with regard to his participation. And I suspect that, Bush was inclined initially to go much farther along with the proposal from Rice, but as has been the case in the past, and I recount several instances of this in my story, that Cheney has then weighed in and basically turned Bush around. Because he has the inside track, he's able to get Bush after he's listened to Gates or Rice and is inclined to go along, and then Cheney comes in and says, well, you can't do that, Mr. President, here's why.
All this talk about the freeze for freeze deal is the same deal that she tried to get going last spring, and they've been thwarting it ever since?
Well, there are different versions of this idea, and I don't know exactly what Rice was proposing earlier, but certainly Solana has raised this possibility in the past of a freeze for freeze. The United States, I don't think, has ever gone along with this. Certainly the Bush administration has never embraced this at any time, but I'm sure that Rice has been interested in that in the past, for sure.
Well, so what do you think about all the recent hype since the last time we talked about, a week ago or so, about war with Iran? There was the thing that came out in the Sunday Times about
the Amber Light.
The Amber Light, that's
Amber
right.
Light.
Go ahead and get ready to bomb them, and we'll let you know.
Yeah, this is, it's unfortunate that we have really the British press weighing in with stories that are far more confusing than they are clarifying. And again, this is in the context of this dysfunctional administration, and I think the Sunday Times story perhaps is written in good faith. Let's give them credit for trying to see through the smoke that is produced by this deeply divided administration. But the result is, I think, an overhyping of the idea that Bush is closer to basically agreeing to an Israeli strike on some unstated conditions. I don't think that he's anywhere close to that at this point, and I think what has happened is that Gates, clearly the story came out of the Pentagon. It's explicitly stated that it came out of the Pentagon. And I think Gates, or someone close to Gates, is using the idea that Bush would be willing to support an Israeli strike under some circumstances to try to get some leverage with the Iranians in the upcoming talks. And in the talks that they were hoping that they would get. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And of course, it may have the virtue, if you will, of reflecting the fact that Bush may well be inclined in that direction, may be sympathetic to an Israeli strike. But again, the White House is Bush himself is a non-decider. I mean, I believe that the basic storyline here, both on the diplomatic and military front, is that Bush is somebody on the issue of Iran who has been unable and unwilling to make clear-cut decisions. Time and again, he has tacked one way on the issue and then pulled back. When he has been inclined towards a diplomatic initiative or, moving forward on the diplomatic front, Cheney has always pulled him back in one way or another. And on the other hand, when Cheney has been trying to get him to take a very hard line to sort of put forward a casus belli on Iran, specifically in early 2007, I point out in my story that Rice and Gates weighed in with language which was on the other side, which said, we should basically view the problem as one of networks within Iraq thus sort of confining any U.S. response to Iraq rather than to raise the issue of a U.S. strike within Iran. And what did Bush do when he was confronted with two completely different lines? He just chose to use both of them. And to me, that's a very interesting indication of the inability of Bush to really make a choice on the issue of Iran. And I think he really is a non-decider in the sense that he would prefer to allow the two sides to duke it out themselves. He would prefer to put off the decision, and he would prefer to make decisions that are non-decisions. And I think that's been the pattern over and over again. He is going to let this go down to the wire, and that is the suggestion that, I mean, as time goes by, as we get closer to the end, my sense is that he is unlikely to be able to muster the courage to strike Iran